striimi laukes, koska ei mitään järkevää syytä, mutta netti katkes. Just. Eli keskellä on ylitiukkaa, reunalla liian löysä. Just naurettavinta tässä hommassa. Jos hierot tää levy. Koetapa sitä sitten saada tasaiseksi. Testataan. Mä teen laittaa hetkeksi taas hiljaiseksi, kun rupean kahtoo opetusvideoita. Tuossa printerissä niinkään paljon on mitään kuunneltavaa, että sama nipinä se pitää kuin aina. Saastana vittu mikä paskaläjä suomeksi sanottu. ihme. Elikkä tämä perhana laakeri, se pyöri äsken irrallaan. Ei ihmekään, että ei mennä. Tähtäys pitää kutia. Laakerikannakkeet pitäisi kaikki uusia. Nämä voisin tulostaa seuraavaksi. Tuleeko tästä mitään, mutta yritetään. Tästä siis tulee tämän sensorin kannake, jotta ei tarvitsisi jatkuvasti tuota paperinpalalla hinkkausta harrastaa. Ihan hieno keksintä olisi tietysti tehdä semmonen, että vaihtaisin kaikki laakeripesät metallisiin. Taas lisää hankintoja. Silloin niihin taas on miljoona.
avoid confrontations with police, not to commit crimes. Charles or Dr. Seacrest, if you'd like to respond, I'd like to say one thing to the entire panel. As we move forward, I want to make sure you understand it's rather informal. I want to make sure everybody gets their point out, but as sometimes points are made over a period of time, I know it can be difficult to go back and respond to every point that was made. So consider it like a conversation if you like to interject at any point. But would either of you like to respond to that?
I would love to. Disagree with everything that you said, but here's why.
I can't believe it.
We've got to make certain that we find that balance. I'm with you. All crimes need to be enforced. We have officers there for a reason. We want to make certain that we are a law-abiding society. I agree with that part of it. No one in their right mind would ever say that if you see a crime being committed, just look the other way and pretend like it didn't exist. That goes without saying. But where I disagree with your argument is when you start to ask yourself, is this worth it? If you see someone who has a broken tail light and you see someone where you try to pursue, you have to think of what's the amount of force that I'm going to use in order to get this criminal. What's the threat to society? At some point, you've got to do that analysis of this human life. Is it worth taking this human life for someone who littered on the sidewalk?
I mean, I agree.
Someone who skipped out on transit fare.
I agree, but don't you think that it depends on the level of threat escalation? Meaning that if a cop pulls somebody over for a taillight, nobody in their right mind is going to say the cop should shoot the guy for a broken taillight. Right? I mean, nobody's saying that. But if you have a situation in which somebody's pulled over for a taillight and the person gets out of the car, confronts the cop, and goes for his gun, that's not the cop's fault for pulling the guy over for a broken taillight. It's the fault of the guy who went for the cop's gun.
Absolutely.
What is low-level crime and high-level crime?
One moment.
Why don't you approach high-level crime?
Sir, you are not the moderator. And one other point I'll make is I did put online, anybody can ask any question, and I will take a look at it and put it here. Plus, one moment, please. Plus, and both of our guests, sir, I can't see you or really understand what you're saying, but I will tell you this. This is for a broadcast, so things have to be on the microphone, first of all. Secondly, both panelists, and you can verify this, I have offered them the chance, which I did not offer to the conservative panelists, to address any specific issue that you wanted ahead of time. I did make that offer, did I not? So please, let's wait to actually hear the debate, which is what people paid to see. So, Dr. Seacrest, I want to get your response to what Ben was saying, or Charles, either one.
Yeah. Okay. This is really, really difficult because I believe in history and I believe in all these kinds of things. I think that they can explain things. And one of the situations here, and quite clearly, when you're looking at the case, and I was absolutely opposed, really opposed, to bringing out the fact that white cops are shooting black males. I was actually opposed to emphasizing that, because I actually felt that precisely you would end up with this argument that Ben has presented, that actually black men are shooting black men more than white cops shoot black cops. And then that actually gives a short circuit to an answer that really demands a lot more attention and a lot more work. And I was actually, I read this and I was saying, no, this whole business, don't fall into this, because you fall precisely into this trap. And then you end up saying, like, yeah, it is true. It is quite true. But then there's white-on-white violence is equally as lethal. I mean, but that we've already lost the direction of the argument, because now we're talking about white people shooting white people and black people shooting black people, and we're not talking about The issue as to what happens when somebody is jaywalking or somebody's dealing with a bus light ends up being policed in this manner, right? Now we're just talking about this other issue, which again, I mean, is kind of faulty. I'll admit it.
Charles,
no,
the two
but
are intertwined, aren't they? Though I mean, in the
No,
sense,
no,
in the sense that
to me,
if the idea is that overzealous policing, that it has a cost and a benefit, right? Overzealous policing has a cost and a benefit. The cost is obviously to the people who are the victims of the overzealous policing.
Absolutely, no. You guys, you often talk about black incompetency, and I've always heard this. Oh, blacks, when you did affirmative action, you're going to have all these incompetent blacks all over the place. Now, nobody ever talks about white policing as incompetent. And I'm telling you, a lot of this policing is bloody incompetent. I'm like, oh my God, were you trained? Did you ever go to school?
I don't think it's unique to white police
No.
officers.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that nobody ever talks about incompetence on policing as a problem. It becomes racialized, and nobody says this is incompetent policing. Full stop.
Well,
I mean, nobody says this.
By the way,
and I hear this all the time, and everybody comes out, and nobody will come out and say, I don't care if he's black or white, that guy was incompetent. And he did not deserve that job. And you bring these people into a community, and we have to suffer incompetent police.
Well, actually,
and then you come out and
Charles,
okay.
no, I totally
let me interject. I can see Monique would like to interject.
No, it's all right. I mean, you talk about incompetent policing. Nobody talks about the fact that, yes, is there police profiling? Absolutely. But you know who started that was my great-grandmother in East LA, the darkest Mexican woman you could find. And did you know what she did? She invited Officer O'Reilly to her front porch of a dirt front yard that she swept every day and taught him what the red do-rag meant and what the blue do-rag meant. Officer O'Reilly had no idea. So has it evolved into incompetent policing? You know, I think it's more of a matter of the fact that, you know, unity in the community is what keeps our families together. As a Mexican-American female who's raised 4 sons, okay, 4 sons, and taught them all that the first time you're arrested, you're on your own, okay, because I have no tolerance for that. 0 tolerance for that. You're on your own. And I'll tell you what, my sons were never police profiled in the library, at mass, or at the church youth group. They were never police, you know, racially profiled there. And that was a true thing. But I have to tell you that the incompetence, is it there? Sure, it's there. But when you look at the Baltimore Police Department or the Baltimore mayor, they're black. Okay, so the incompetence does transcend the color of their skin, and it can transcend some of that incompetency. However, I would like to point out that the first officers that came into East Los Angeles to help my great-grandmother, they didn't know what a do-rag was. They didn't know what the creased khakis were or the word cholo was. We taught them that. When I say we, I mean the Mexican-American community, because we were scared, very scared of the drug dealers that would threaten us, that would wait outside mass and hit up the old ladies for money to protect them. So I have to say thank you to our policemen and women. And, you know, I can't believe that an Officer O'Reilly, an Irish officer of the law, would even know that if we didn't invite them into our communities and say, we need help. And that's where we're at today.
Now,
I gotta jump in.
during the Ferguson...
I want to catch on that because I also have sons. But the difference is that my boys will be profiled when they're coming out of church. The difference is my children will be profiled when they're leaving or sitting inside of a library. Those are the types of instances that I'm fighting for. I want to make certain that someone who's got a big afro doesn't seem too radical, like she's going to commit some type of crime. I want to be able to change the look of someone who's walking down the street wearing a hoodie, that they don't become a suspect, that they're up to no good. I want to make certain that someone who listens to hip hop, it doesn't take much to be able to profile someone. Oh, that person's one of them. It doesn't take us much to create those definitions.
I'm so glad,
unless we're able to do that.
I'm really glad you
just a
said
second.
that.
Let me interject a question
Sure.
here because there is a question about sons. Because
Sure.
Charles Medady wrote a column recently about sons. He wrote about Toya Graham, the mother who is now being hailed as Mother of the Year because she was smacking her son numerous times.
I've done that.
To herd him away from the rioters in Baltimore. And Charles, you wrote on the Stranger blog, quote, "I'm a father who worries about keeping my own black kids alive. The smacking is not an act of moral outrage, but an act of desperation. She rightly feels that her society places a very low value on men who look like her son. She does not want to end up like the parents of Freddie Gray or Michael Brown. With the scale of public outrage and acclaim for her actions, why do you believe society doesn't value those who look like her son?
You know,
Just Charles directly, because it's his call.
Okay, guys. All right, I have to say this really. I mean, I'm a pragmatist. I'm not kidding you. I really want to, I don't like emotional, you know what I mean? I really like to say, what are the facts telling you, right?
Fear.
What's that?
Fear.
Fear. Yeah, no. So basically, in the 1970s, around 1972, basically you had a prison population in the USA of roughly, I think it was just under 100,000, right? With a population of 200 million people. And now you have a prison population in the USA of basically, in 40 years, you have a prison population that's around 2 million people. And a lot of those in prison are black, right? And so how in the world did it between 1925 and 1972, the prison population was pretty stable, right? And then suddenly it explodes in 1972, and we have a huge prison population today. Is this Darwinian selection? I mean, really, if you tell me Darwin works that fast, then yeah, let's talk about that. Well, you know, because maybe there's an issue like the finches here in the Galapagos Islands, right? You know, black kids are just like got crime that fast, and it exploded. I just want you to be really practical about this. And if you tell me that those figures are not strange, right? And do not speak of a fundamental shift in the society that is not to do with biology or race, I mean, meaning race in the sense of biology and genetics, then you have to come to conclude that there was a cultural shift here. You have to come to conclude this. And in that sense, you have to say that the people are being incarcerated in the society and policed in a way that is now that if you're not sensible, if you're not really practical about it, you have to say you have to either go in the defense to protect your children, right? Or you have to be ignore the issues and act like that this doesn't exist. But I can't believe that suddenly a lot of black males in the space of 40 years became suddenly criminals that you could just throw into jail in that space of time.
I'd like to try and get one really concise.
I'm just saying that. That's
just a
all.
second. I'd like to get a concise answer from both of you on what exactly do you fear for your sons? Just a concise, maybe a sentence or two, and then I'd like Ben and Monique to respond so we can narrow it down.
Look. I was brought up in a household, and I was middle class. I didn't grow up in a poor household, and my parents are educated and so forth and so on. And I grew up being told that basically that you really have to be careful about white people, and you have to be careful about how you present yourself with police officers. You have to be careful about all these things. We had sober conversations in our house because for us it was just like, this person or that person got hurt or that person ended up in jail, and you don't want to be in that situation.
Elisalta talven jää.
Basically, there was a lot of like this kind of sober talk, and I had to have this conversation with my own son and say, don't kid yourself. If a police officer comes, remember that they're seeing a black person. Just be aware of that.
Dr. Seacrest?
I recall looking at the video of the desperate mother who probably in her eyes was slapping her son to try to save her life, the desperation of that moment. And I had to reflect on what my grandparents, what my parents before her probably had to feel in that same type of desperation. You see, you've got to go into the history when you're talking about African Americans here inside of the United States. We've got to look at the stories of our grandparents having to teach, don't look a white person inside of their eyes, make certain that you look down. Those old lessons that were taught to children and the importance of what took place if they ever were to disobey that rule. The consequences for us could cost our lives. And so I try to take myself back into those moments when, as a parent, you don't want to see your child forget what those rules are. You don't want to see your child put himself inside of harm's way. I look at that video and I can see a mother who's desperate, trying to fear of, if an officer catches you in this type of climate, he may give you a warning. That would be on a good day. But we also know the consequences of that could cost you his life. So I've seen the desperation of that. I know the historical significance of how our parents would try to make sure, don't mess up, don't break the rules, because there's thousands of written rules, and then for us, there's the unwritten rules.
Do you think the unwritten rules are the same now as they were in the time of your grandparents? Because you're saying
Absolutely.
Really?
My son, let me tell you why. Absolutely. The unwritten rules, we have to make certain that we're teaching our children. I recall dropping off my son to college last fall, and as I'm going through, he's studying pre-med at Wazoo. Any parent would be proud. I'm still telling this bright and gifted kid, baby boy, if you get pulled over, make certain that you listen to the letter of whatever the officer's saying. I don't care how rude he's being. You say, yes, sir, the entire time. Baby boy, don't touch your cell phone. Before you reach for your registration, make certain you let the officer know what you're going to do before you remove your hands from the wheels. Those lessons come from our grandparents, but it's understanding.
Those aren't the same lessons as 80
Those
years
are the-
ago.
those are
the
definitely-
lessons of 80 years ago were significantly more strict than tell the cops before you reach for your I mean, if those are the same rules, then my parents told me, and I'm pretty white. You know, so it's, I mean, I'm not suggesting that young black men don't get a different look from a lot of cops. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am suggesting is that the rules have changed pretty significantly, and if we're going to act like the cops treat young black men now the way that they did 50 years ago, it's a slander on cops.
I believe that they do.
Really?
I believe that the police brutality, the movement of the Black Lives Matter, that didn't just surface all of a sudden, where
The
in the
statistics
last
don't
few
bear it out.
years that
I can
officers just
assure you-
suddenly
I-
started.
I can
This has
assure
been a
you-
history.
I can assure you Black Lives Matter and the hashtag are coming up very shortly. Let's hear really quickly from Monique about
Great,
parenting.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I have 4 sons and 2 daughters. My 4 sons are 26, 21, 21, and 13. One of my sons, Buddy, is 21 years old, and if he ever hears me talk about him, he'll just like die. But I remember very specifically, him going through his teenage years, and I find out at 17 years old he has the AK-47 tattooed on his stomach. And I'm going, what the hell is going on here? And pretty soon he's gonna join a gang. And you know what I said to him? Well, you know what happens when you join a gang? You get jumped in. And he said, yeah. And I slapped him square in the face with my hand. Because I said, you want to get jumped in? I'm going to jump you in right now, okay? It's ridiculous for you to walk around with 2 parents that own a business acting like you want thug life in the middle of your stomach. So what do I fear for my son? I fear for my son that he will not learn the value of hard work, that it's not worth it to him to get $9 an hour minimum wage because he's going to get 15 now and decides to sell drugs instead for the quick dollar. That's what I worry about for my sons, that the streets will swallow him up. And I see that now with kids protesting for $15 an hour now. I started at $4.23 an hour as a busser. I now have a business with 4 walls and 60 employees. It didn't happen overnight. It happened for me cleaning toilets, cleaning up throw up, learning as much as I could and saying, if I want to earn more money, I need to get the next job. So what do I worry about for my son? I worry about his entire generation of iPads and iPhones, that they don't know the value of patience and hard work. They don't know the value of experiential equity because they get it right now. I'm going to go protest so I get $15 tomorrow. No, the hell you're not. You're going to learn your job, you're going to build some equity, and you're going to give your boss a return on investment. So what do I worry about? That he won't ever get that.
Let me assure you as well, we'll be approaching the minimum wage coming up too.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
David, I do have a quick comment. I do have a quick comment about the mother and the kind of media-wide worship for this mother who's in public slapping the living crap out of her kid.
With an open hand.
With an open hand. My question is not about that particular incident. My question is why her son is on the street in the first place throwing rocks at police. Because
you were never a teenager? You were never a teenager.
I was
in your
never a
life?
teenager who threw rocks at the cops.
let me interrupt you both because I'm quite sure that this conversation will.
I'm sorry. I like
Charles,
I
just
like a good teenager.
Charles, let me
hold on
assure
one
you.
second.
Let me assure you that your answers to the following question will then head into Ben's direction here. And because I spend hours for these events preparing, I like to insert myself from time to time just to pretend I exist.
That's why they picked the tallest man in the room to moderate.
That's right. This is why everybody else is on that side of the room, and then there's me. So I wanted to get a short answer from each of you. I'm going to use my stopwatch because everybody seems to have a different definition of short. So in 30 seconds or less, we'll start with Monique and work our way down this way. I want to know this. In the aftermath of the as yet unexplained death of Freddie Gray, Baltimore obviously suffered a great deal in riots. Some are calling the riots a cry for justice, something you get when you deny people a voice. Others say it's opportunistic criminality. You might say it's something else. What do you think these riots represent? 30 seconds or less.
I know that problems of the future are not best served. Did I do that? Sorry. Problems of the future are not best served by solutions of the past. So, Thurgood Marshall, who was chief counsel for the NAACP, grew up just 2 blocks from there. And you know what path he chose? Not rioting, not picketing. not stealing wheat thins from the CVS. He chose the path of legality to change the course of his people through Brown versus the Board of Education. So what do I think those riots are? I think they're depravity, I think they're thugs, and I think if you really want to make a difference, Thurgood Marshall, who grew up just 2 blocks from there, did such a thing, who was a contemporary of Martin Luther King.
And now I'd like to skip over to Dr. Seacrest.
I look at the Baltimore uprisings as more than just riots, right? I hate the idea when you say thugs and riots, right? White people riot as well. When y'all win Super Bowls 2 years in a row, y'all get off the hook. Don't make it seem like it's just Baltimore getting upset. So my 30-second answer is I feel the frustration of what's happening in the community, and I think it's a symptom. The uprisings are a symptom of a pressure that's been unaddressed for too long.
Ben.
I'm offended by the language of uprising applied to people who are breaking into other black people's stores and looting them. This is a lack of values. And people who are destroying private property, destroying cop cars, in an uprising against what exactly? Against the black police chief, against a mostly minority police force, against the black mayor, against the black president, against the black attorney general, against against a city council that is 9 of 15 are black and all 15 are elected Democrats. What is the uprising against? What is it seeking to achieve? I still don't see what exactly the riots are seeking to achieve. Bottom line is, this is all, it all could be boiled down to just act like a mensch. Act like a human being. Honestly, it's not useful to riot, it's not useful to break things, it's not useful to throw rocks at people. And the idea that we're supposed to sort of correlate your level of outrage.
I'm going to stick to the 30 seconds on
the
this
last
one.
sentence. The last sentence.
Yeah.
The idea that we're supposed to correlate your level of outrage with a certain level of justification. In other words, the more outraged you are and the more angry you are, the more justified you must be, is absolute nonsense.
Yeah. I personally don't care. It's a riot for me. What? Yeah, they robbed, they threw stones and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not going to I don't like going into that argument, because you end up with avoiding again. You end up where Ben can just chop you down really quickly, right? Because you're like everybody sort of forgets. I mean, yeah, they're rioting. Yeah, they're looting. What the hell is that? That is exactly what they're doing. You know, and I don't want to end up like arguing over what they're doing is rioting or not, because I end up stuck in that argument. I want to understand why that riot started. That's what I'm more interested in. You know what I mean? I want to know exactly why would anybody get there? Because that's another discussion and along the lines. And you know, again, I want to just say this very quickly. I know it's got a few minutes. I'll just say this. Yeah.
You're also
redefining,
so what? You're also redefining 30 seconds.
So Michael Brown is 18 years old and he may have charged a police officer, right? Yeah. Maybe it was a bad decision. After all, he is, remember, 18 years old. I mean, everybody acts like 18-year-olds make great decisions all through their bloody lives. I mean, I'm always stunned.
Charles, allow me to exercise my divine right of interruption.
A young black male.
Charles,
why can a young black male
Charles,
be
moderator
allowed
has
to
a
make
position,
a
job here. Everybody's got to play by the same rules here on this panel. So just like I'm interrupting Ben, that was a good minute and 30 seconds of the 30 seconds here.
Sorry, you said we work at our own time. I'm working African time.
I want to point something else.
I want to tell you, 30 seconds.
I want to point out something else, which is, do you know that the ladies know how to keep time? All right. Let me do a follow-up question. This one is directed at Ben and Monique, and we're going to move into income, and I'm sure we're going to revisit Baltimore and Ferguson here in a couple of minutes. But I wanted to start with this. I got an email from Pastor Wayne Perryman, and it was about a different topic, but he brought up a number of things that I wanted to share with you. According to Pew Research, the net worth of white families in 2013 was $141,000. For black families, it was $11,000. Even less than the $19,000 it was in 2007. According to economist Edward Wolf of the University of New York, excluding vehicles and other durables, the median black family worth is just $1,700, while 40% of black families have zero or negative wealth. White family worth in terms of financial worth is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't, and when, you know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Anybody can jump in. It's an open mic there.
So I would need to ask, have any of you ever been on food stamps? Have any of you ever applied for welfare? I have, and I've been on WIC, Women, Infant, Children, and I'll tell you why there's such a disparity. As a single mother at 17 years old, as a Hispanic female, I was told by my Democratic-led city council of all the programs I could be on, but you can't own a car, and you can't have property, because if you do, you're cut off. So you know what I was encouraged to do? Get on as many of those programs as possible. We become dependent, suckling pigs of the government as minorities. And it's why I voted Democrat, because they're gonna give me women, infant, children. I'm gonna get food stamps until the day that I stood in line and my son wanted fruit snacks and I couldn't get them. You know why? My women, infant, children only covered kicks, cheese, and eggs. And you know what I said? If I want something different, I better make my own goddamn money. And I'm gonna tell you something. In Baltimore, when you look at a city, these urban hubs, these urban cities like Baltimore, like Atlanta, like Dallas, they're all run by not just Democrats, liberal, progressive Democrats who love to get the vote by saying, we're gonna take care of you, let us take care of you. That is pandering, that's pandering to me. I can take care of myself if you give me the opportunity. Don't tell me that I can't own a car, because I will own a car. So why is there disparity? Because the day that you have a car that's over the value of $3,000, your kids get cut off a free lunch. That's the reason why there's disparity.
Let's make sure all language stays radio friendly.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Gosh darn it.
Moments ago, both of you were about ready to jump out of your seats, and this is unusual for me because usually that means words will follow, but there was a pause. I want to give you this opportunity to
well, Lent is
fire
over,
back.
so let me cross myself.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the wealth gap, I have so many.
Tämmönen sitä tuli. Ja nyt periaatteessa se pitäisi tökätä tänne. Mutta. Näyttää vähän hankalasti siltä, ettei se sinne mahdu. Tässä toisinpäin vielä huonommin. Lisäksi tässä on pari kohtaa hypännyt, eli huomataan tuossa alareunassa ja tuossa yläreunassa. Ne on pikkasen hypätty yli. Tuommoinen mikrosteppi, niin se tekee tästä aika heikon tästä rakenteesta. Se kestäisi kyllä sen, mihin se on tarkoitettu, mutta se saako sitä mihinkään järkevästi paikalle onkin sitten ihan toinen kysymys. Toinen vaihtoehto yrittää se jotenkin tänne taakse laittaa. Minkäs mä sen nyt lasken kädestä? Oli just kädessä, mutta nyt se on jossain tuossa. mahdollisesti näihin. Ei, se on liian pitkä väli noilla siihen tarkoitukseen. Pitää suunnitella uusi tämmönen kannake tai etsiä uusi kannakeosa. Siis. Ja menisikö se tuohon sitten? Se on just tämä, että se jäi molemmilta puolilta vähän lyhyeksi. Tää olisi ihan hyvä paikka sinällään, koska tässä ei ole, oikeastaan se ei ole minkään tiellä. Tämä pelti on vähän turha pitkä, että mahdollisesti tätä eteen tai taaksepäin siirtämällä voisi saada riittävästi tilaa. Tai sitten näiden päälle laittaa isommat välipalkat, mitä ne nyt ikinä olisikaan nimeltään, jotka antaa korotusta sen verran. Toinen vaihtoehto tietysti jos laittaa tänne hirveän ylös. Siinä on se ongelma, että se ei taida yltää niin alas asti sen. Pitää katsoa, miten tämä uudelleen suunnitelmaan. Uusia osia. Tämä on just vähän tämmönen, että laittaako tulemaan vai laitaanko, että nämä on vähän niin sanotusti just sitä, että tämä esimerkiksi liikkuu tosi huonosti. Tässä on tosi huonot nuo laakeripesät. Tää liikkuu sentään suht mukavasti. Tai tää hyvä on nyt näin jäänyt. Kysymys kuuluu, mitä tälle asialle tehdään. Tämmösiä mä oon tulostanut muutaman. Mulla on toinen tämmönen, jossa on vielä sisällä sellainen palikka, millä mä sitä puhistin. Se on kiinni. Periaatteessa nämä kestää ainakin täällä laakereina. Mutta en tiedä, onko nämä riittävän tarkkoja, että ne olisi ollakseen hyviä. Tuon näköinen palikka on siellä toisen kiinnikkeen sisällä. Niin se on tukevasti paikallaan ainakin. Voi jotain osia vielä koittaa puolustaa. Kuten huomattiin tässä niin koko matka, jos yrittää tehdä, niin tuossa kohti teki jo ensimmäisen tommosen ihme pompun ja sitten se kuvitteli, että se olisi käynyt tuolla päässä, kun se stoppasi siihen ja sitten se meni tältä puolelta ihan reippaasti yli. Tuota. Se on hyvä puoli, että tää toimii jotenkin, mutta se ei ole hyvä puoli, ettei tää toimi hyvin. Niin, tuossahan tuo onkin. Siellä on vaan tuommoinen toinen palikka juttunut sisälle ja sitten mä en saa sieltä nyt pihalle. Näitä mä mahdollisesti teen lisää, jos mä saisin ne vaan tasaiseksi tehtyä. Tämmönen varsin onnistunut tappi mulla on, mutta se on taas liian iso mahtuakseen mun sisään. Saa lyötyä sitä takaisin tuota palikkaa. Toinen pää on tämmönen umpipää, niin se pitää toisaalta hyvin paikallaan tuon laakerin sitten kun se laittaa, mutta nyt se on vähän hankala. Kun tää on tämmönen ontto, niin meissellä työntämällä tulee tommosia reikiä vaan. Nuo kun ei oo umpipalikoita.
Any responses? We'll just take the easy ones. I'll go for the low-hanging fruit.
enough. But the last time I checked, my home loan was not measured against the color of my skin or how tan I am or not.
Then check your Attorney General's office and you will see that there's still settlement checks by those banks because of their unfair lending practices.
But you're saying that there would have to be, you understand there would have to be industry-wide collusion to make that happen. So you're suggesting that all the banks are Bank of America.
You know,
White people don't know when they're jacked. And it's really something that you guys got to learn. When you're getting stiffed and jacked by the banks. And it's not a matter of like whether the banks are racist or not. It's whether they're going to make whether they're going to fleece you or not. A lot of times, and this is in St. Louis, and this is in several neighborhoods, what they would do is they would actually raise the cost of the value of homes that white people were owned by threatening that blacks were coming in, right? And that your house would be devalued. No, don't ever, when you wonder like, oh, is this thing like, did this thing that the banks are doing, is it that the racists or not? No, wonder how are they going to fleece you, and they will. No, and everybody's got to realize when they will use anything to fleece you. And to me, it's not an issue of like of whether you could say like that blacks were receiving loans or not. My question is, why in the world wouldn't you give a black person a loan? I mean, and instead, and you find out often there was a great deal of advantage for not doing so. There's a lot of money to be made by those kinds of discriminatory practices. I'm sorry, I'm a very economic person. Believe me, I know capitalists want to make money. And so I do accept. And my
Charles,
question
the banks almost went bankrupt because of the subprime crisis.
No. The subprime crisis was a real bunch of nonsense. And so basically, what happened is the banks were running out of people to make money off in the ordinary system, and so they had to like switch to poor people who had nothing and give them home loans. They actually switched those home loans and securitized them and sold those securities on Wall Street, and they overvalued them. And then they said, finally, when it sort of caught up, and suddenly people had to actually pay for this stuff, right, which they couldn't afford, then suddenly the entire system crashed because they had all these bad securities on their hands.
Right.
No. My question is, I'm not going to say that.
No, yeah, this is a good explanation, but I'm just wondering what the point is.
I mean, are you crazy? You listen. You're talking about securitizing.
I understand what credit default swap is. I just don't understand your point. I mean, if your point is that banks made terrible decisions.
Terrible decisions? No, they made a lot of money. I don't.
Before they went bankrupt.
And we bailed them out on it. No, we bailed them out. They made some bad decisions.
You're right.
We live in an age where banks are allowed to make lousy decisions and not pay for it.
I agree with you. No bailouts.
The problem.
Welcome to the Republican Party, Charles.
No. But no, that's not how it works. We have to pay for their bad investments.
But the problem is people that make $11,000 don't have securities. They have a SNAP card that they use. And so if you want to talk about income disparities, talk about that. But the FDIC, they say FDI what? I mean, that's really the problem. If you have someone making $11,000 a year, they're not being a victim of the FDIC or low securities. They're being pressed down by government that wants them suckling at the teat. That's what it's about.
This is follow up on the same general topic. I'll direct it to Monique since she's got the mic. According to the ACLU, a 2010 report found 69% of the people sued by debt buyers, people who are buying debt, were black or Latino, and 66% of meritless cases were brought against black or Latino clients. Are debt collection practices also proof of racial injustice that needs government repair?
No, because in order to get debt, you have to have something to loan against. So if you have an asset, that's simple economics. You have to have an asset or some sort of collateral, correct? So in order to get that asset, whether it's your Audi 5000 or BMW you can't afford, you have to have credit worthiness and the ability to get that. That's bad choices. As a single mother, as someone that started as a busser, I learned bad choices. If I made a choice to not pay my rent and instead go out to a club or do something like that, I made a bad choice and I should be held in consequence of that. In 2015, very few people are held in consequence of that. Very few. And I think it's a lesson that needs to be enforced even more. So if you have an ability to have collateral or you have ownership and now the debt collectors are coming after you, shame on you for not having integrity and best practices. If you sign a contract with someone, whether it's for an exchange of goods or services, for this amount of money, I will do this service for you. I'll provide you with a hot meal. I will wash your car. I will do your lawn. That is a contractual obligation. There's nothing wrong with that. The same thing with credit worthiness. If you sign a contractual obligation saying, I'm credit worthy, I will make these payments on time, I don't care what the color of your skin is purple, you were, didn't abide by that contract. So no, I think that is not true.
No jumping in?
What?
I think I need some coffee.
I was being polite. I was like, no. I did not.
Wait, this is one for the record books. The strangers being polite? What's happened over there?
Yeah. No, yeah.
I feel like I've had a strong influence over there already.
No, oh shoot, there's so much stuff.
Careful, Dan Savage couldn't fire you.
Yeah. No. I mean, you have to really hit it. Look, I don't come from everybody needs to understand that I don't come from a family that was poor. I wasn't poor. I wasn't raised poor. My parents were educated. We lived in a really nice neighborhood, and so forth and so on. I'm not coming here to plea on the ground of a background that was harmed and where white people were beating up on me and so forth and so on. No, actually, I didn't have this thing. I actually grew up in a world where, it's sheltered, quite simply so. And so, I mean, when I'm making these judgments, it's not from a personal experience. It's actually from looking at the way the world works, right? And I'm just saying that if you were to say, from my perspective, that young men, that they're black and that there's no racism and all this stuff, I make this call. Yes, I'm black, but I make this call not from a position of experience. I actually make this call from the position of saying the facts seem to look like this. I'm sorry. Yes, the banks have the loans and so forth and so on, and the discrimination.
Let me ask
is
a
real.
follow-up for both of you then, since the issue of disparity has come up a number of times. When does disparity not indicate racism?
Level of effort.
Statistical disparity. For example, overwhelmingly men commit crimes more than women, but we don't say that the Justice Department is sexist. So, is there a line that you draw for yourself, or is there some way that you interpret statistical disparity and you determine that that is not a racial disparity, it's something else? Well, we can return to it. That's okay too. Ben, did you want to?
Yes. It's called evidence of racism. When there is no evidence of racism, it's probably not racism. When there is actual evidence of racism, it's probably racism. And the fact that everybody jumps from there's inequality and therefore there is inequity, just because there's inequality does not mean there was inequity.
But there has to be racism. You can't say there's no racism.
Without evidence?
No. I'm just saying that I don't know which animal. Maybe we're talking about dogs or something. I'm talking about human beings, and I'm like, human beings are most likely going to have racial prejudices. I'm just so sorry. I'm just so sorry. I don't know. I don't come from. I come from planet Earth.
Charles, I want to ask you a question. So your default is that when there is no evidence, racism is the deciding factor. That is your default.
No, it's not saying that. I'm just saying that you're going to have sexists, you're going to have racists, you're going to have all this stuff. I mean, I'm just saying that.
I agree it exists, but the problem that I'm seeing, and this is the problem with the general conversation, is that there's no solution in simply saying there's racism out there. How does that solve anything? I mean, when you talk about there's institutional racism, what does that mean? Show me a law that is racist in intent, and we will agree. Show me a police officer who commits a racist act like we saw in South Carolina, right, where a police officer shot a black man running away and it was obviously unjustified, and I will agree. But you need, the idea that you can craft a narrative based on no racism because it just must be somewhere out there in the ether, that doesn't solve problems for anybody and creates more problems for people because now they grow up in a milieu and an environment where they are told that every obstacle they face is from some shadowy, nameless, faceless group who is out to get them simply because of the color of their skin. They'll never succeed in that environment.
You know, the weirdest thing is that actually in the black home, as I experienced it, really, there is no discussion of racism. Racism actually is a discussion that you actually come out and you face in the public because it's a real thing that you have to actually expect. I mean, you're silly and you're foolish if you don't really think that that's going to be there and encountered in the real world. I'm sorry, this is just a fact of life. But if I'm at home and having dinner with my father or whatever, we don't go, oh my God, this society is so racist as I'm eating my steak, and you know what I mean? Oh goodness gracious! Oh, I can't bear it. My black skin's causing. I mean, no, we don't talk like that. Actually, we don't talk like that. We talk about, my God, Aunt, what's her name? Oh my God, she's got to take some pills because she's off the register. I mean, it's just like, these are the conversations we have at home. We don't have these kinds of conversations that we're having right now. At least in my childhood, we didn't have them. And I'm watching the people I knew growing up in the black neighborhood, I didn't hear anybody really talking about race when we were at the dinner table. I mean, it just didn't really pop up, unless it was an issue, it was on television, but mostly it was about family and regular life.
But I disagree. I have to tell you, even in my culture, there is an underlying racism. And I know that the panel today, and especially with what's going on in America, we're talking about white on black. But I cannot wake up in the morning and not think about, intercultural racism, okay? I'm not Mexican enough. Why? Because I'm articulate, and because I have straight hair and I can wear high heels. I don't have a tattoo on my neck. Yes, there is a huge problem with racism, no matter if you're light-skinned or dark-skinned. Absolutely, there is intercultural racism. It's absolutely underlying. And while you may not talk about it, your grandmother will have the favorite grandkid. If she's the lightest one with the good hair, that becomes the favorite grandkid in our culture. And that's, unfortunately, even within our own cultures, we tend to look upon, the color of each other's skin and how much education we have. And if my uncle has done time in jail, which, he has, then he becomes more Mexican than I am. What is up with that? I mean, it's sad, but it's true. It's absolutely true. It's like I can't eat spicy picante sauce, so I'm not Mexican enough. It's true, in every culture, whether it's Asian, black, Mexican, there is, while you may not have grown up talking about it over your, tea and toast.
I mean, in my family, if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, you're not Jewish
enough. You're not Jewish enough. It's true.
That part is true. This entire time, I've been trying to think about your initial question about disparities. Are they automatically tied to race? And at first, I think all of us were stumped because we were trying to think of the instances. I do agree that they are separate, that they don't necessarily correlate within itself. There are disparities. NAACP, we are the experts inside of the nation of bringing in the racial lens for all of the work. No, they're not necessarily going hand in hand, or they're not necessarily tied to each other. So that's how I would answer it. No, they don't have to go together. My job as a civil rights attorney is to be able to make you see race at every given opportunity, but no, it's not present in each and every single disparity. To your second...
What are the standards? What are the standards, the difference? I mean, you said that you want people to see race in every single issue.
Where
so
it's present. Where it's present.
Okay,
so for instance, if we're
what's
talking...
your standard as to where it's present?
Absolutely. What's my... take something as simple as if we're talking about a disparity, say men and women. My job would be to show what does that look like when you have women from a different group, communities of color. What does it look like when we're talking about a woman who's working or stuck in a minimum wage job, not as a starter, but for her career?
Right. No, I guess the question I'm asking more specifically.
And so we bring in the racial dynamic of how that affects.
No, I understand that. The question that I'm asking is, when do you decide something racist has occurred?
Racist?
Yes. When can you decide that an act of racism has occurred? Because if you have just a statistical disparity, has an act of racism automatically occurred? That was David's basic question, I think.
Right. There's obviously there might be there will be a disparate impact on different groups of people. That doesn't necessarily mean, I think what you're saying is, doesn't necessarily mean something racist is going on, even though there's a racial impact. So the question was about where do you draw the line between something that might have a racial impact but is not inherently racist. Yeah. Let me move on, and if you want to come back to that, that's fine at some other point. But you had mentioned, Dr. Seacrest, that you had mentioned that we have to go back to history. So this is what I want to challenge Ben on history. On your show, Ben, you said that you believe the 1964 Civil Rights Act was flawed. How is that different from telling black Americans that they should have to continue enduring the endless indignities of racial discrimination and segregation that a war and constitutional amendment could not change.
Okay, so when I talked about the Civil Rights Act of 64, what I said was flawed about the Civil Rights Act of 64 was not 8 of the 10 titles that talk about what the government can and cannot do. What I said was flawed is the government forcing private business owners into doing things. Because Jim Crow was the government forcing private owners into doing things. Jim Crow was not an informal regime of private business owners doing things. It was actual laws on the books forcing businesses to discriminate against people. I mean, you can look up the Jim Crow laws. They were statutory. They were present in the South. The point that I was making is that it's a very dangerous precedent once you start saying that the government gets to dictate how you run your business, especially given the fact that capitalism does take care of this problem in the sense that the only color that matters under capitalism is basically green. And because the only color that matters is green, if you discriminate against someone in your business, this is why Jim Crow laws were actually imposed in the first place. If you look at the history, the reason the Jim Crow laws were enforced in the first place in the South, and they didn't take place in other parts of the country, the reason Jim Crow laws were necessary is because they tried to set up an informal regime of discrimination against blacks, and that didn't work because business owners were cheating because they wanted to get black people's money. And so what happened is that the government came in and they said, okay, no longer can you do this. And the Civil Rights Act, instead of saying, okay, get rid of the Jim Crow laws, which of course is totally appropriate, and those were unconstitutional to begin with under the 14th Amendment, instead of just doing that, the government went to the extreme of, now we are going to dictate what you do with your business. Now, I may very well agree that people, and I do agree, in fact, that people who discriminate against black folks in their business are evil and wrong and nasty and deserve to be boycotted and put out of business. I agree with all of that. I just don't agree with the fundamental principle that the government gets to tell you what you can and cannot do with your business for the same reason that I think there's freedom of association. I think black historical colleges should be allowed to be black historical colleges if they want to be, and they shouldn't be forced to admit white people if they don't want to.
Would either of you like to weigh in? No?
I know, there is so much to that. There's so much. You know how in your gut, everything, when someone's talking, it's just like hurting and in knots, and so that's what happens when you say this. It's all up in here.
I actually carry around a bottle of Pepto-Bismol if you're interested.
The night,
Where's the wine?
That's a different Jew.